Welcome. You are listening to The Place We Find Ourselves, the podcast where we not only talk about all things related to story, trauma, and therapy, but also have the privilege of hearing real-life stories of interview guests. I'm Adam Young, and this is episode 6, titled When Your Femininity is Assaulted, with Tracy Hansen. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. Anytime you share a true story from your life with the general public, you are risking the possibility that there will be some who don't hold your story with the sacredness and honor that it deserves. And so as you listen, I invite you just to consider, what does it mean to hold with honor the story of another human being whom you don't know? And how can you receive Tracy's story with both a sense of sacredness and a sense of gratitude, knowing that it has cost her something to share this story in a public way? I'm glad that you're listening to my interview with Tracy. Okay, welcome, Tracy Hansen. It is good to see you.
It's good to see your face, Adam.
Say a bit about when you first learned that you had a story and what prompted you to kind of begin engaging your story.
Yeah, so I played 16 years of professional golf on top of college golf and junior golf. And so I had been playing for 30 years by then. And it really wasn't until I left my arena of performance and got separated from where I could find my acceptance and my identity by what I was doing that I started to feel like there was an unraveling happening in me, and I didn't know what it was. I knew I had loss and harm in my story, but I did not put the right intensity to it. And so I actually met a woman, Kay Agel, working for a totally non-related company outside of sports. And she noticed me and started pursuing my heart. And so I started talking about some of my past things, relationships that were my fault. She's like, I think you have a little bit more to talk about, and I need to introduce you to some other people to do that. And actually, there was one other person before that heard a little bit about a relationship I had back in high school, and she actually labeled it sexual abuse. And so it was the combination of these two people who I'm like, I don't think I like that, nor do I want to embrace that's about a part of who I am. And at the same time, I knew I needed something. I needed something different and some help. And so I was willing to kind of walk that road with them.
So there was initially, like in the naming of sexual abuse for the first time, there was like reluctance and fear.
Absolutely. There was a part of me that was like, okay, maybe. And then there was this other part of me, because I was so entrenched into holding my shame and the what I believed was my fault for so long, that there was no way I could. It just was like this embrace, like it was like a wall I was looking at. Like that can't be right. That I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be a sexually abused person.
Right. So given all the energy to not want that to be true, what was it that prompted you, that allowed you to explore the possibility, to talk to other people?
I met this other woman, Tracy, and Kay introduced me to her, and she worked for a ministry that provided care and training for people in their sexual abuse stories. And we sat and had lunch, and I'd say Kay, Tracy, and I, and it was in those 45 minutes, I had more tears and I was more heard than I'd ever felt in my life. And as scared as I was to enter into the reality of my story, I also felt this compelling that, yes, I want to do this. It was so unknown, and yet it was like, I know I need this, and I'm scared to death to do it.
What a amazing 45 minutes.
It really, yeah. I mean, it gives me kind of goosebumps to rename that.
Because in some ways, if I'm hearing you right, your story kind of pivots on those 45 minutes.
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way, but I think you're right. It was definitely a turning point for me.
And the opening or the plunge was in part because you felt seen and heard by Tracy in ways that you hadn't before.
Yeah. Her affirmation, her words, her NK as well, both of them with the everything happening in my life at that point in time, there was a lot. And just to know that I wasn't crazy, that there are things that were happening on the inside of me that had cause and effect, and that it just wasn't like I wasn't imagining things.
What did you do after the lunch? I mean, what did it look like for you to kind of take the plunge into exploring your story at a deeper level?
So I ended up doing some one-on-one counseling, and that started about 3 weeks after that initial lunch. And the idea was that I would do 4 or 5 sessions with Tracy to get ready for this small group experience, to be with other people who have similar stories. And that, I mean, I'm an introvert, so that scared me too, to sit around with a group of people and talk about this stuff. And I mean, I still remember trying to find the office where I was going to meet Tracy for the first time, and all the doors were locked. And I'm like, why am I driving down here? This is dumb. I should just turn around and leave. And but I stayed. There was just something in me that knew I needed to stay and wait and get into that building and start the process. So I would say that I was so shut down that I didn't have many words for any of my emotions. I know I had emotions, but I could not articulate them. And I mean, I could tell my story, the facts of my story in the most flat line emotional state that I've been told by two people that I'm boring when I tell my story. Not now, but back then. And it's just I could not engage my emotions for a long time. It was a really rough road to get me to start to break down and loosen up those words. And it's almost like I had to relearn a vocabulary.
Yeah, and that was how long ago?
That was in the summer of 2011, so 6 years ago.
So, I mean, just seeing the moistening of your eyes now as you tell the bit that you're telling now, like you have changed immensely in 6 years.
Yes, I have. And I have friends that affirm that in me, so it's good.
And that's flat out uncommon. I mean, for someone as shut down as you were, to have tears 6 years later for your heart, for your story, for your 45 minutes with Tracy. And it's testimony and evidence of the reality of the resurrection in the world now.
Yeah, I love that. I think what I've learned, or I've been learning a lot in the last maybe 8 to 10 months, is this idea that to have resurrection, you have to have death. And so I've been trying to be more aware and pay attention to the places in my story where even I have to go back, and there's more. There's so much more that I can go back to, that to understanding that in that death and naming the death is where my life has been resurrected again and I'm redeemed by Jesus, for my sins, but my story's being redeemed every day. And the more that I can recognize and understand and be aware, and it it really is life giving. I would say that I'm more alive today than I've ever been in my life.
Yes. So you said something really interesting, that without death, there can be no resurrection. And you seem to mean that with regard to more than just Jesus's death and resurrection. Can you say more about what do you mean by that?
I think for me, what I'm learning is that I get outside of myself and will spend energy helping other people, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, financially, or performing, or making something nice, or details like that, at great cost to me, and most often. I love to give, and I believe I'm a generous person. And sometimes it's at great cost to me. But what happens is that I'm doing that because I'm avoiding something. And so for me to recognize that there are things that I lost in my abuse. And not just my abuse, but even with my relationship with my dad and my mom and my family life that happened really was the setup into the abuse. And so as I recognize those places of loss and death, until I can name that, I can't get to the other side of it. And so it's instead of being the but, it's the and in the both. That yes, I lost my innocence. I lost nurture and unconditional love and just the sense of being adored. And on this side of it, there are people that if now I can embrace those people who do love me and adore me and want to be with me just to be with me, not because they want something from me. And it's a battle, almost a daily battle for me to be able to hold both of those and embrace and bless in the context of that.
Yes. So you have graciously and generously offered to read one of your stories. Would now be an okay time to do that?
Sure. It was sixth grade, the awkward and sometimes emotionally violent time for any kid forging their way through the muck of adolescence. I was a tomboy with straight blonde hair in the shape of a bowl cut with a slight feathering around the ears. My big round glasses looked as awkward as I felt. In fourth grade, I wrestled with the boys and played football on the playground. Surviving on the playground was a daily obstacle. One day I left a fellow male classmate with a bloody lip after kicking him in the mouth. In fifth grade, I punched a girl because she called me a name. But in sixth grade, something different started stirring inside of me, something unknown, and it was a desire to belong. Puberty came for me that year, and a boy actually liked me. I don't remember why or how I came up with the idea, but one day I decided to wear a dress to school, something I had never done before because I hated dresses. There wasn't anything about me that was girly because I was my daddy's tomboy, and my sister was the girly one. It took every ounce of courage inside of me to put that dress on and walk onto the school property. Within moments, I felt the heat of shame and humiliation fill my body. I felt like a fraud in that dress, and the ridicule and looks from my schoolmates confirmed it. I was not a real girl. I didn't belong in a dress. I made a vow that after that day to never wear one again. Fast forward to December 2016. I had worn a dress less than 20 times since that awful day in sixth grade, and that is a generous number. As I watched the Christmas decorations going up in my friend's apartment, I heard the word Dressember bounce off the brick wall as the conversation circled around me. A conversation that I wanted to be a part of, but I pretended I wasn't paying attention to it. "What are you two talking about?" I asked. "Dressember. It's where women around the world wear a dress every day in December to raise money in the fight against human trafficking." I rolled my eyes and acted cool, but my heart jumped and started beating really fast. My mind and emotions erupted into a full-blown wrestling match. My gut tightened as I silently spun all the reasons why Dressember was out of reach for me. I don't do dresses. 31 days in a row? Really? Nope, not for me. Their words invited me back to the conversation. "You could totally do this, Tracy. It would be so good, and you could raise a lot of money." I could feel myself retreat and shut down. And I leaned in and asked with a nervous laugh, "Tell me more." Later that night, I laid in bed looking through the Dressember.org website and mumbled, "I can't do this. This would be unbearable." I sent a text asking if the others were signing up as individuals or as a team. Cortisol flooded my body. I was actually considering doing this. The first reply said, probably as individuals, and that I would do great. From a fundraising standpoint, I agreed this would be true. Simultaneously, I felt a wave of disappointment because I know on my own all too well. Moments later, a second text buzzed. We are going to do a red tent living team. 30 minutes later, I was signed up and committed to wearing a dress for 31 days in December. I drifted off to sleep feeling anxious. Anxious because I had no idea how I was going to do this, and anxious for what God might do in and through me. The only way I knew I could do this, however, is if I did it together with my friends. During the fourth week of the challenge, I felt weary of wearing a dress or skirt every day. My body craved my jeans and soft pullover. I wanted to quit really bad. But the goodness of my self-discipline propelled me forward, and I pressed on to finish what I started. The goal of Dressember was to raise money to help end the dark world of human trafficking. I was overwhelmed by the donations and support that came from both expected and unexpected places. And Dressember was an invitation for my feminine heart to come out and play. And it did. When I started my Dressember journey, I asked God to help me embrace being comfortable in my femininity, whether I'm wearing my golf shorts or a dress. And wild Jesus showed up. With each day that passed, I started to get a little more comfortable in my femininity. A new confidence began to rise within me, a more fully embodied confidence. The image I bore since that fated day over 35 years ago said that I didn't belong as a girl. The 31 dresses I wore are now 31 standing stones that are my tangible reminders that my femininity is beautiful and that I do belong. I am a girl and I am a woman.
Thank you. It is an honor and a privilege to hear the story.
Thank you, Adam.
It's amazing how, you talked about resurrection and death, and this story really shows the movement from immense death, really even that predates the cruelty of your classmates, but death related to your femininity, and then the resurrection of it. So I'm wondering if we can just kind of walk through and reflect on different parts of this story that seem significant.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The first kind of plot twist that I noticed seemed to happen in sixth grade when all of a sudden you had what you called was a desire to belong. I mean, in many ways, the setup for this entire story is this desire to belong. And it just strikes me, the more I do these interviews and hear people's stories, that so many of the pivotal stories of our lives begin with a rising desire for something. Can you say some about maybe even how is it that a girl gets to sixth grade without having a sense of a desire to belong?
Yeah, I think, for me and my story, it goes way back. I was the third girl born, and my dad, from what has been told to me, my dad really wanted a boy. And to whatever weight I should or shouldn't give to this part of the story is that so much so that my parents didn't even have a girl's name picked out. All they had was a boy's name picked out when I was born. And both my parents are gone, and so I can't ask any questions. And so I'm taking some data that I've gotten from secondhand relationships, people who knew us very well. But so there was this sense of also chaos that I was born into in my parents' relationship. And so I have pictures the first couple of years of life where my hair's a little longer, kind of wispy blonde down to my collar, and I'm in these little baby dresses. And then there's a shift, and it's a very drastic shift. And it happened probably around 2.5 to 3.5 years old, maybe 4, where I no longer was wearing dresses. I was wearing boys' clothes. And so I can't make sense of all that. Again, I don't have my mom to ask the questions of what, why, or how, but there were two boys that we were our closest family friends. They had two boys. My mom had two girls, and we all played together. Well, I played with the boys, and my sister did kind of her thing, sometimes playing with us, but most of the time not, because we were out playing cowboys and Indians and riding our bicycles and playing in the dirt and making mud pies and getting into trouble. And so there was this place where it's like, I want to be one of these boys. And then somewhere inside of me, I noticed how my dad liked that. And so I think it's both, where there's this setup where uh, he longed for this tomboy and this boy that he could play with or be with or do things with. And then I think there's a part also that it's really hard for me to name, where my mom kind of gave up on me and kind of handed me over to my dad as like, okay, I'm not going to fight you. And so in first grade, I mean, my Christmas presents were a Tonka truck, a football jersey, and I had a huge smile on my face. I refused to go shopping with my mom and go shop in the girls section. I wanted to shop in the boys section. And what I hear is that I threw major tantrums. And my mom just was like, somebody help me and take her and just get clothes for her. So I think the setup starts way back there, and there's more for me to process there. But that's where it really started, is like, I was adverse to girls' things at a young age, for whatever reason it may be, and how I got there, whether it was my dad or my mom giving up, or, for a long time, I believe that I chose it.
Mm.
But how does a 3, 4, 5-year-old choose that? I don't know. And so there's space in there where I'm still learning to be compassionate for that little girl. That in many days I have more angst for that little girl, or rather than kindness. And but that's where it really started. And so by the time I was first, second, third grade, I mean, I looked like a boy. I believed I wanted to be a boy. And yet there was shame and ridicule that came along with that, because I was confused as a boy, because when I went into the girls' bathroom at a new school, there was a girl that thought I was a boy and thought I was in the girls' bathroom. And so it started really early. And so that part of my femininity got shut down, and I did not know how to access it. And I don't believe that I had the people that should have been helping me access it. I don't remember my dad adoring me as a little girl.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when a first grader, and nothing wrong with giving a girl a football, but when a first grader girl doesn't also get other gifts besides jerseys and sports stuff, it kind of begs the question of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't play with dolls. I destroyed my sister's dolls instead of playing with them. So, yeah, it really is an interesting, like when I look at my pictures and just, it is a stark shift in my story.
Yes. And so, I mean, you allude to your sister being the girly one, but it's clear that almost, I mean, from the moment of your birth, there seems to be this developing contrast between you and your sister.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that. And as I look at our junior high and high school days, it grew, the expanse grew.
Mm-hmm.
Where like my dad never even, I mean, I don't remember hearing the words beautiful, it was always kind of adverse for me to wear makeup. My sister actually tried to help in those areas, but my dad didn't want my hair long. He wanted it short.
Right.
My sister could wear makeup and look pretty and go on a date, but I was to study and play sports.
Yes.
And with the sports, it wasn't like it was like a demand that I played and practiced, but I knew that in my performance, I was getting my dad's attention.
And if I'm hearing you right, that was the only way to get it.
Yes. Yes.
And so you were in many ways, kind of put on a trajectory if you wanted any connection with your father or affirmation, a trajectory that we could just say was against your femininity.
Yes, it was for sure.
So back to the story, it's kind of stunning that one day in sixth grade, you have this desire to wear a dress.
Yeah, I remember, I think, I mentioned puberty happened and that scared me. And I'm like, what's happening to my body? But I started to not want to be one of the boys on the playground. And I mentioned a boy liked me and I had boy interests, like, little kid, like third, fourth, fifth grade, kind of like, oh, I like him, he likes me, that kind of thing. But I remember sixth grade wanting to feel more like a girl. And even the little feathering of my hair, instead of just having a straight bowl cut, I had a bowl cut with a little feather. And that was a big thing. And yeah, so I don't remember the details like leading up to why I decided to do this, whether it was about the boy or not the boy, but I wanted to fit in as a girl and not just be that tomboy brute that was going to stand her ground on the playground.
Yeah, and the feathering of the hair, it might be a small difference, but it was a girl fighting for her femininity.
Yeah, yes, wanting to be considered a girl.
Yes. The options available to you to connect with and express your femininity were so narrow that feathering your hair was, that was one thing you could do.
Yes.
And it's so sweet to remember that you did that.
Yeah, when I look at that sixth grade picture, it I used to laugh at it, but now I smile with compassion.
Yes. So it was like you said, it was a massive risk to step onto the grounds of this school with who you were, kind of your social role, wearing a dress. A massive risk for you
Yeah.
as a sixth grader to do that.
Yes.
You had to not only overcome your hatred for dresses, but you knew that you were going to be appearing very different than you normally appeared in your peer group with your classmates.
Yeah. I have a small sense of what my body, like I don't remember totally the whole scene, but my body's remembering. Even as we're kind of talking right now, like it was almost like I sheepishly got to school and kind of gingerly walked in hoping for something, hoping for somebody to notice. And yet there was this, like, I just, all of a sudden I wanted to be invisible and hide and run. And like, it was so, like, I was so outside of uh, what gave me any sense of control.
Right. And so the combination of the immense risk that you took and the courage that you had and really the desire to wear a dress, it was a perfect setup for immense heartache when you were ridiculed for it.
Yeah.
And in the story, you say that you made a commitment in the wake of that ridicule, in the wake of that heartache, to remind me, never wear a dress again.
Yeah, that's what I said in the story, that I would never do that again. Um, and I think in that, it, not only is it about not wearing a dress, but it's also about powering up and maintaining my control over myself, that where other people can't harm me. And so yes, absolutely. I don't remember wearing a dress to school ever again. I didn't even wear a dress at my high school graduation, and I had to give a speech. So there was something about a dress. I felt powerless in a dress, I think. And that just is coming to me in the moment, that I put a dress on and I felt fake, powerless, out of control, and maybe even weak. Like there's this like there's no image for me to stand on in a dress at that time.
Right. And so even as you put words to that, it underscores just the immensity of the risk that you took in wearing the dress that day.
Yeah.
I'm just struck by, given all the stuff that was against wearing a dress, whatever desire got stirred in you, it trumped all that day, and you put a dress on.
Yeah, for one day.
Uh-huh. Um, and then ridicule and a sense of being uh, of shame, and you're all of a sudden making a vow that you would stick to for a long time.
Yeah. Um, it's almost as if I would say that I killed my desire. As a 10-year-old can understand that. Because I was young for my age. So I think, 10, maybe an early 11-year-old. I think killed my desire and to want to belong in with other females, and that I belonged in this athlete, and I was just becoming kind of an athlete. I was just starting. I'd already been playing some softball and soccer, and I just was starting golf, and I was just starting basketball. And golf and basketball became my two sports the rest of my time in school. But it's almost like I killed my desire to be feminine and soft, and that I could only be this strong athlete. And the two couldn't go together for the next 35 years.
Yeah, so good to hear that the vow is about a lot more than not wearing a dress. I mean, the dress seems to be so symbolic of, I mean, what would you say? Femininity?
I think it for me in our that era, not that a lot of girls wore dresses every day, but there was this constant feeling like, well, my sister's girly and she likes dresses, and when we do go to church, which wasn't very often, then you put a dress on, or for Mother's Day, or and so the women, although my mom didn't wear dresses all the time, and yet she wore dresses. So there was this perception that, to be a woman or a girl, you did put dresses on, and that was attached to femininity and beauty. And so for me, I didn't like dresses, and my dad didn't encourage that with me. And actually, he encouraged the opposite, that I don't need makeup, I don't need long hair, I don't need um, to look that way. Um, it's okay for me to ride motorcycles and play sports and get dirty, and um, so yeah, it definitely is. It's I knew it was an important story, and the more we talk about it, it's like, wow, this is a really important story in my life journey.
It's so good to hear you name that what you killed was your desire, if I heard you right, to belong to womanhood, to women.
Yeah, and interesting that that's happening right around when I was hitting puberty,
Yes.
because that is, we know puberty is the transition from child to womanhood, or boy to manhood. And I really haven't thought a lot about that either. And I think there was other things happening too in that time, where I was starting to notice that I didn't like being with my dad. And that's probably a whole nother podcast, but and so multiple points of action are happening. I'm hitting puberty. The man who I adored and wanted to do anything for, all of a sudden I didn't like to be with, and he made me uncomfortable. And then the desire to wear this dress, but it doesn't fit the image that other people think of me, and so now I'm ridiculed and shamed and want to be invisible. So it was a kind of a catastrophic.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like, I don't think it's a stretch to say there was an assault on your femininity from the moment of your birth right through that day in sixth grade when you feathered your hair in a bigger way. You put on a dress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that day became a horrific day.
Yep. Yeah. I agree with you that there was an assault for my femininity. Yeah.
How have you come to understand that in light of just the world in which we live, with the reality of evil at play in this world, in our stories? How have you come to understand how evil was behind this assault?
I think what I've mostly understood is that where I believed for a really long time that it was something that I was choosing, that I wasn't always, sometimes, but not always choosing it. And I think in that, it's given me permission to believe that I am feminine, that I am beautiful, and not just physical beautiful, but just there's beauty that resides in me because I am a woman.
Yes.
And it's still very hard for me to live into that every day. So when I hear people say, it just happened this weekend, one of our friends said, Tracy, you bring so much beauty. And my first instinct is like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. Like, stop. And yet then there's this other part of me is like, yes, I do. And so it I would say that I'm still fighting for my femininity. And I'm further down the road than I've ever been. And there are days where the battleground in my mind is so strong that it's exhausting.
So that segues to Dressember and this anxiety producing invitation that you kind of overheard as you're putting up Christmas decorations about wearing a dress every day. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like,
Right.
I mean, God writes stories into our lives, if for no other reason than to say, I see you. Like, I know this war rages in your heart, and I know that what happened in your heart that day you last wore a dress.
You know, even as you say that, as I think about the conversation happening around me, the two women that were having the conversation, not that they believe I'm feminine and beautiful, and yet I don't think they would have included me in that conversation to do that unless I would have interjected myself.
So you were feathering your hair.
I was that's great. I love that. Yeah, I mean, because I was listening,
Yes.
but I don't think it crossed their mind to even include me in the conversation, knowing because they knew my story. And yet, when I leaned in and asked more, they were so excited that I was even asking the question. And then it was like, oh, yes, you can join this. You belong here with us.
You inserted yourself. You leaned in. Um, you feathered your hair.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you've got a big time bind on your hand.
Right. Now I'm like, dang, I'm stuck. What did I do that for?
Right, because dresses are powerlessness, their weakness maybe, they are uh, nothing good. And yet you believe deeply in both reclaiming your femininity and fighting trafficking. And so you've got this bind on your hands. What in the world happened in your heart that brought you to the place to say, I'm in?
When we were talking about it at my friend's apartment, I was all over the place. Like, I cannot do this. And in their encouragement, I was feeling more and more hypocritical or like almost more shutting down and trying to back out of it. And yet it reminds me of when I grew my hair out from being short to long back in the early 2000s. And my dad didn't want me to do this. Now I'm a grown woman. I have a choice. I have the right to grow my hair out. And it was the biggest risk I had felt to that point in my life, to do that by my choice and to follow through with it, and all the awkward stages of the in between. And it felt the same as I stood in this conversation, like this desire, like I had wanted to grow my hair out for a long time, but it wasn't the image that people knew me, and so I didn't. And so I didn't risk doing it. And so I was feeling the same thing about this dress thing, is like I want to feel comfortable and in my own skin wearing a dress. I want to feel beautiful and sexy and womanly and in a dress. And it was everything that I have never felt before. So you're right. It was a huge bind, because it was like such a stirring inside of me, is like, can I fit here? Do I really belong in this womanhood with these friends of mine who I think are beautiful and always look fun, and not just beautiful physically, but they just fit in what they're wearing. Like they just look like they belong in their womanness. And I just have always struggled with that. Like, and so there's the push and pull inside of me was like, oh my gosh, like I could all probably passed out in the moment as we were talking about it. I mean, that's how much energy was going on inside of me. And so when I got home, and it was just stirring, like, and yes, there's this element of like, because of who I am as a golfer and the network of people that I have access to, and then the fact that this girl who doesn't like dresses is going to wear dresses, of course, people are going to give money to this cause, right? And so then it was like, you can make a lot of money. And I'm like, yes, I can make a lot of money. And I'm always about Tracy can make a lot of money. And so while there's goodness there, there's also this place of like, yeah, but that's not what I want it to be. And so the first text that I mentioned in the story of like, well, no, we're going to do it as individuals. It was like, it just deflated me. I use the word disappointment, but it was really a stronger emotion that I was feeling, is like, I don't want to. Could I do this alone? Could I buck up and do it? Like put my boots on and like, yeah, I'm going to do this because I can, and I'm going to fight through it and just be strong. Sure. Yet there was nothing in me that wanted to do it alone. Because you go back to that desire to belong, and which is such a huge theme in my story in multiple places, is especially as a professional athlete, an individual sport, the story of my abuse, the story with my parents, living a single life for 44 years, that I just wanted this sense. I crave belonging. And so to hear like, no, we're going to do it as individuals, it was just like this, like, let me just put a sword in you. You're still alone. And so then when the next text came, it's like, no, we're going to do it as a group. It just was like, I'm in. Like, it's like I pushed the send button, like I signed up, because my desire to belong with people I care about and to feel that they want me a part of them is so strong. And so it was just like this, it was like, it was soothing. It was drawing. It was like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's going to feel as uncomfortable as I've ever felt in my life. I mean, I'd rather hit a golf ball in front of 2,000 people than put a dress on, for 31 days. So yeah, so that sense of doing it together was a huge catalyst for me to say, okay, I'm going to do this.
I mean, it's astonishing that, I mean, in so many ways, this decision, this 24-hour period, however long it was, I mean, the culmination of so many warring trajectories inside your heart are all of a sudden like full bore there, present.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if God is, he was calling you to come out and play when you got the second text.
Yeah. And then I had to accept the invitation.
Yes.
Because there's so often where I have been invited to play and I've said no. Mm-hmm. Because it felt too risky.
And so, in accepting that invitation, it's both repentance and it's saying hell no to the assault of evil against your heart.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Which makes it on the surface, it might look like a relatively small decision. But this story, this is huge. I mean, in so many ways, this is a turning against the 4 decades long assault of evil against your femininity and saying no more.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Adam, that while raising the money was awesome and we rocked it, there was so much every day things happening inside my heart as I put on a different outfit and chose the outfits. And you know what's funny? Maybe not funny, but so after I decided, the next day I woke up, and so now I got to figure out, do I have anything to wear? Now I had some golf skirts, which I'm new to the golf skirt world. Like, I refused golf skirts for a long time because that didn't fit in my image either. And now I enjoy them. And so I started in a friendly way by wearing my golf skirts because I was at a golf tournament helping, just kind of, and so it fit the setting. Like, I wasn't going to wear high heels and a dressy dress out to the golf course. But when I went through my closet, and so everybody's like, do you even have anything to wear? I'm like, I don't know. And so I actually found potentially 14 different options inside my closet to wear. Most of those 14 options had never been worn, but they've been in my closet.
Right.
And I think that's significant too. Like, because I told my friends, I'm like, I think I actually have this many. And they're like, what? Like, how, why? Like, and you've never worn them? I'm like, no. I mean, a couple things still had tags on that had been sitting in there for a year, 2 years, or, and some things that had been given me by other people, or that I bought and I maybe wore one time, to church, or to a wedding, a dress that I had to wear to a wedding or something like that. So that shocked me.
Yeah, there were 14 pieces of evidence that you had tried or were considering feathering your hair again.
Yes. And yet they stayed in my closet.
But they were in your closet. Which means that you either went to the store and bought them, or you were given them as a gift and you hung them up in your closet.
Yeah.
Which flat out feels, again, like the beginning of saying hell no to evil.
Yeah.
What a fun surprise to look in your closet and to be like, holy cow, there are 14 options.
Yep. Yeah, I was shocked. And I started texting. I texted my sister. I'm like, you're not going to believe what's in my closet. I text my 2 friends that, got me to sign up. You're not going to believe what's in my closet.
What a fun story. Well, it seems small to say thank you for what you have shared today, but thank you.
You're welcome.
And will you just say a few words about if people want to, I know you're writing and doing things, if people want to get more connected with you, how can they find out about what you're doing in the world?
Sure. I think probably the easiest thing is just to go to Tracy Hansen. That's Tracy with a Y and Hansen with an O.com.
Thanks for listening to The Place We Find Ourselves. If you enjoy this podcast, please visit theplacewefindOurselves.com and sign up for my email newsletter. This allows me to send you helpful story-related resources and also to keep you in the loop about upcoming trainings, story groups, podcast happenings, and the like. Music for this podcast was provided by Rick Wilson. Thank you, Rick. Until next time.